Uh-oh.
Okay, we'll start with this. What are the updates to the current Ring IQ women's pound-for-pound list as a result of yesterday's unified title fight in between then-champion Emma Kozin and Cecilia Brækhus? Because so many are still saying that that was Cecilia Brækhus' final fight, that will be the fight that she retires on, and she won't fight again, at this time, I don't even know if I should update the list. Now, I myself have my suspicions that Cecilia may not retire off of that fight. She might hang on to those belts long enough to see about unifying them with Mikaela Mayer in the coming calendar year. That if Mikaela beats Mary Spencer at the end of the month and becomes WBA junior middleweight champion, I wouldn't be surprised if in the coming year, her and Cecilia have a unification match of their own. Though at this time, that's just a speculation. That's just me bouncing ideas around. I don't even know if I should update the list. On the predication that Cecilia were to continue after this weekend, well, she would likely land in the number 3 spot ahead of Tina Ruprecht, pushing everybody behind her down one spot and pushing Gabby Fundora off the list completely, it being that Gabby ranks in at number 10, in the most danger of being bumped off.
How it would go, Tina would get moved down to number 4, Yokasta would get moved down to number 5, Alicia would get moved down to number 6, Mikaela would get moved down to number 7, Terry would get moved down to number 8, Ellie would get moved down to number 9, and Shernika would get moved down to number 10. Gabby would be pushed off the list completely, it being that while she's young and accomplished, she's not as accomplished as the fighters that are ranked ahead of her. She's undisputed, but so Shernika Johnson.
Except that Shernika Johnson's been a champion at multiple weights, not just undisputed. Ellie beat Shernika.
She's going to be fighting for undisputed very soon. Terry Harper, she's been a champion at 3 weights. Mikaela's been a champion in 2, unified in 1.
Alicia's undisputed, and she beat Mikaela.
Yokasta's been unified, and she's been a champion at 3 weights. Tina Ruprecht, she's been a champion in 2. She's been undisputed. She beat Yokasta.
And you see what the rationale is, that even though Gabby's very accomplished for somebody so young, her body of work is not yet as robust as the fighters that are ranked ahead of her. So if we were to rank Cecilia Brækhus in the number 3 spot moving forward, that would push everybody down one spot and push Gabby off the list. Cecilia Brækhus has a recorded 24 successful title defenses as a welterweight champion, 10 of which were defenses of the undisputed crown. And currently, she's unified junior middleweight champion, making her a 2-weight world champion overall. So as stated, if she were to hypothetically decide to stick around the sport of boxing a while longer and maybe see about unifying those titles with Mikaela, she would rank in at number 3. That would be the most logical spot for her to rank in based on the governing criterion of this list.
Don't yet know if I'm going to have to update it, but we'll find out. I mean, we'll find out in the coming weeks and months if Cecilia really does decide to retire off of this past weekend's win over to the men's pound-for-pound list, where there's been a lot of movement and a lot of discussions as to who should be the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter. I've decided to go ahead and rank Terrence at number 1. For me and my money, Terrence and Usyk are interchangeable. Usyk, who I previously ranked at number 1. And the argument for Usyk to stay number 1 is still a valid one. It's still legitimate.
Still stands up to scrutiny. I've made the argument myself on several occasions. But if I've decided to go with Terrence at number 1 after 3 weeks,
they're interchangeable, Terrence and Usyk. There's really not that much between them to where if you want to rank Usyk at number 1, You can. The logic still stands. But that logic also stands by Terrence.
5-weight world champion, 4-time lineal, 4-time Ring Magazine, 3-time undisputed.
You're not going to see another resume like that for a very, very long time.
There's been a lot of movement in the second and third tier of the list as well. 4-weight world champion Naoya Inoue moves down to number 3. Undisputed light heavyweight champion Dimitri Bivol moves up to number 4.
As a result of Canelo Alvarez losing his titles and thereby being ejected from the list per the rules that govern it, no fighter absent of a world title coming right off a loss is allowed to maintain a rank. The list is only for winners and only for champions, reigning champions, not former champions, not guys who used to have a belt but don't have one anymore.
It's for reigning champions. Canelo losing that fight to Terrence Crawford has gotten him bumped off the list, which created a vacancy that now the other fighters occupy. Everybody moved up one spot. Dimitri moved up to number 4. Teofimo moved up to number 5. Shakur Stevenson up to number 6.
Unified Cruiserweight 2-division champion Zerto Ramirez maintains his spot at number 7. Bam maintains his spot at number 8, but there are 2 new entries towards the tail end of the list.
3-weight world champion Emmanuel Navarrete of Mexico comes in at number 9. 2-division champion Stephen Fulton comes in at number 10. As a result of Junto Nakatani vacating his 2 alphabet titles upon his ascent to Super Bantam, and as a result of Kenshiro Taraji losing his 2 alphabet titles in his last fight, per the rules that govern the list. No fighter absent of a world title is allowed to maintain a rank, and no fighter coming right off a loss is allowed to maintain a rank. The list is only for winners and only for champions.
Yeah, well, Junto didn't lose his last fight.
No, he didn't, but he did vacate his 2 bantamweight world titles. He's about to make his super bantamweight debut towards the tail end of this year in Night of the Samurai, hosted by Turki El Al-Sheikh and the Saudis. And him not having a world title at super bantam, we don't know that he'll be able to stay in character up there. He has to prove that, and the only way that he can prove that is by winning a title there. Wins a title there, he's back on. 4-weight world champion.
Well, he knew he's got all the titles there.
Precisely. Junto Nakatani's ticket to get back on this list is by going through his compatriot Naoya Inoue. But until such a time as he does that, he doesn't meet the criterion to stay on the list. He's about to fight Sebastian Reyes in his super bantamweight debut. And if by some chance Sebastian were to beat Junto, does that make Sebastian a pound-for-pound fighter? Should he occupy a spot on this list?
Or is it just that he caught a smaller guy moving up in weight? That Junto wasn't able to stay in character at Super Bantam?
See, that's what that rule attempts to account for. That you may be good at one weight, but perhaps not in another. The way for you to prove it is to win a title at your next weight. And until such a time as you do,
you're off the list.
Now with Kenshiro Taraji, it's a lot more straightforward. Kenshiro Taraji lost his 2 flyweight titles to Ricardo Sandoval in his last fight. That automatically ejects him. The saving grace for Kenshiro is that he's moving up in weight in his very next fight, and his very next fight will be against the IBF champion at Superfly. IBF champion Willibaldo Garcia. If Kenshiro wins that fight, he will have a credible enough argument to get back on.
If Kenshiro wins that fight, that will make Kenshiro a 3-weight world champion.
And if Kenshiro wins that fight, that will make him a person of interest to the winner of Bam Rodriguez versus Puma Martinez, happening at that same weight for 3 of the 4 major titles. Here's looking forward to that.
So Emmanuel and Stefan are only there as placeholders?
Wouldn't go that far. Emmanuel Navarrete has reigned as a champion for a very long time across 3 weight classes, 122, 126, currently at 130, and he's got a robust body of work. Solid wins over then-champion Isaac Dogbe, Oscar Valdez.
Boatload of title defenses across those weight classes, too.
Wouldn't be fair to ignore that Emmanuel Navarrete has been competing and campaigning as a world champion for years now, and in the absence of those other two guys, he has a credible enough argument to come in at number 9. Stephen Fulton comes in at number 10, having beaten Angelo Leo for the WBO at 122 and Brendan Figueroa for the WBC.
He beat 2 champions at 122, one more at 126 technically, when he beat Brendan Figueroa again in their rematch at a higher weight. Currently, he's moving up to 130. He's about to fight O'Shaquie Foster.
He's what I like to call a champion in transition. But if upon moving up in weight, the champion, who still holds a title, if that champion's very next fight is a title fight, they can hold their position until such a time as an outcome is decided. Stephen Fulton would become a 3-weight world champion if he beats O'Shaquie Foster in his very next fight.
It's really not a bad-looking resume. That win over Angelo Leo aged beautifully. Beat Brendan Figueroa 2 times, and if he beats O'Shaquie Foster at a 3rd weight, yeah, you gotta give him his flowers. Now back over to the top 2. Back over to Terrence and Usyk. As stated, those 2 guys are interchangeable. If a guy told me that he's got Usyk at number 1 and Terrence at number 2, I wouldn't argue with that guy. There's a valid argument behind that, but there's also a valid argument to the alternative.
Do you understand that? Terrence Crawford is a 5-weight world champion, 4-time lineal, 4-time Ring Magazine, 3-time undisputed.
That's Henry Armstrong kind of stuff. Sugar Ray Robinson kind of stuff is what that kind of stuff is.
And he didn't beat just any champion to do it. He beat a pound-for-pound fighter like himself. He beat Canelo Alvarez, who has been the most dominant force in that division for at least 5 years now. Consider how many plaudits Roy Jones Jr. got for moving up to heavyweight and beating John Ruiz, who wasn't even the best heavyweight champion at the time, whereas Terrence, he moved up in weight and beat the best super middleweight at the time. So I'm going to give him the flowers that a lot of the American boxing fans don't want to give him. Always tearing him down, always overanalyzing and over-scrutinizing his resume over what is obvious, that Terrence is by and large the best American fighter the sport has seen in the last decade.
Certainly one of the best fighters in the world, if not the best fighter in the world. As stated, him and Usyk are interchangeable, and that's okay.
It took a while for me to decide how I wanted to do this thing, as the logic is valid on both sides, but when I saw that there were still some people out there trying to criticize Terrence Crawford and over-scrutinize his resume, that's what did it for me.
You guys have been trying to keep this guy down for the longest time, and I'm not going to be a party to that shit.
So Terrence Crawford is Ring IQ's number 1 ranked pound-for-pound fighter until further notice, as the list often changes, but he's number 1 right now.
In men's super middleweight news, with the WBA's update, Canelo Alvarez receives his 3rd number 1 rating at 168 pounds.
As each section and body releases its normally scheduled update, Saul Canelo Alvarez is entering their respective rankings in a new position, no longer the undisputed champion, but still rated highly. Canelo, 63 wins with 3 losses and 2 draws, 39 knockouts, lost to Terrence Crawford September 13th, and since then, he's received number 1 slots from the WBC,
behind Terrence Crawford and interim champion Christian Mabili, and the WBO. Now, the WBA.
There is a legitimate argument that the sanctioning bodies are making it very easy for Canelo Alvarez to pick up his old alphabet titles should he decide to do so upon his return. But that's not saying that he doesn't deserve that opportunity, because having reigned as this division's undisputed champion since late 2021, he shouldn't fall too far down in the ranks, as dominant as he has been. Via the WBA, Canelo is at number 1 behind Crawford and interim champion Jose Armando Resendiz, who upset Caleb Plant in May for that secondary belt. Canelo supplanted Bektemir Melenkuziev, who is now at number 2. They are followed by Jermall Charlo, Hamza Shiraz, Caleb Plant, Darius Fulgrim, Callum Simpson, Pavel Siliayan, Diego Pacheco, Bek Nurmangabet, Junior Yunan, Edgar Berlanga, Jurgen Doberstein, Eden Avdik, and Uel Hernandez. The other notable change in the WBA super middleweight rankings is that Lester the Molester Martinez, who had previously been number 3 after Melenkuziev and Charlo, is no longer listed. That is likely because Martinez fought WBC interim champion Christian Mabili to a draw on the undercard of Canelo versus Crawford. Sanctioning bodies tend to remove fighters who hold or are vying for other organizations' belts. Then again, delisted fighters tend to return to the rankings shortly after failing to capture those titles. Lester the Molester is currently under orders to fight Christian Mabili for a second time, and I think we are all collectively looking forward to that. The IBF, unlike the other three, prefers to keep its top spots vacant unless a fighter wins an elimination bout for that ranking. That eliminator was held September 4th when Oslis Iglesias stopped Vladimir Shishkin. Canelo will likely enter the IBF's ratings at number 2 behind Iglesias, and so it would seem that the former undisputed champion has his pick of the litter as far as what title he would like to fight for next. If he would like to fight for a title, he can go in pretty much any direction and get that opportunity, especially since nobody's expecting Terence Crawford to stay this division's undisputed champion. Whether he moves down in weight or he retires, one way or another, those belts are going to be redistributed, affording Canelo an opportunity to pick one or some of them up if he's still interested. Now, over 60 fights and 20 years into his pro career, I don't know how much or how little Canelo actually cares about still picking up alphabet titles, but theoretically, if a fight were set up between him and, say, Hamza Shiraz, that could be for the WBO.
And that would afford Canelo Alvarez a chance to become not only a two-time super middleweight champion, but to reintegrate himself into the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list. When you have a body of work like Canelo Alvarez's, which is long-standing, spread across many weight classes and many champions, many quality scalps, all you really need to do to get back on is get back in the winner's bracket and get yourself a belt to prove that you've still got it. And I think that Canelo still has it at a certain level. There's a lot of talk of Canelo being on the back nine, being in decline, and maybe he is. But a win over a Hamza Shiraz is still a quality win. For example, Hamza Shiraz, who just stopped Edgar Berlanga, proved that he belongs and he can hang and he can bang at 168. So if Canelo were to fight him and beat him and pick up a title in the process, he'd be back on the list.
Perhaps not at number 1 or number 2, but he'd definitely be on there. You can't amass a body of work like Canelo's and have it overlooked based on the knee-jerk reactions of slack-jawed gawkers and slaves to the moment. Canelo Alvarez would still be favored to beat most super middleweights out there. So what does that say about Canelo? That even if he is on the back nine, he's still one of the best in the world.
And he's already beat a good number of them. Caleb Plant, Jaime Munguia, Edgar Berlanga.
The reason I don't sneeze at Canelo Alvarez's more recent fights at super middleweight is that for any other fighter at the weight, if they amassed those same wins over those same fighters, you'd be hearing about how great they are and how solid their resume is turning out. So that when Canelo fights those same fighters and beats them decisively,
people got a different attitude. They want to act like it doesn't matter. But just imagine if it were Christian Mabili that beat Caleb Plant, that beat Jaime Munguia, that beat Edgar Berlanga. Just imagine if it were Lester Martinez that fought those same fighters and won. What would people say then? So that when Canelo does it, they act like it doesn't matter. And I'm not a proponent of those kinds of double standards and attitudes.
Canelo, by all accounts, means to fight on. That's what he said immediately after the loss to Terence Crawford. He may have another 2 to 3 fights in him. And if in those 2-3 fights he becomes a champion again, he's back on the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list.